You know what drives me absolutely nuts? That demo loop you see at the big box stores. You know the one, the slow motion honey dripping on a strawberry or the exploding paint powder. It's a lie. It's a complete fabrication because every single manufacturer, and I mean every one of them, knows that if they crank the saturation and blow out the brightness, your brain just goes, "Ooh, shiny," and you pull out your credit card. But here's the problem. When you get that shiny TV home and you put on a movie, something like Dune or The Batman, something dark and moody, everyone looks like they have a sunburn. The shadows are crushed. It doesn't look better. It looks wrong. See, true color accuracy, it's not about pop. It's about discipline. It's about boring stuff like the D65 white point and EOTF tracking. And right now, there is one TV that hits those marks so perfectly out of the box, it's basically a studio mastering monitor that happens to have a tuner in it. It is, honestly, it's a technical marvel. But, and this is a massive but, it has a price tag that makes my wallet physically hurt. So the real question I want to answer today isn't what's the best TV? We know what the best TV is. The question is, do you actually need to pay for it? Or is there a way to cheat the system, get 98% of that reference picture, and save yourself about $1,500? Look, we buy these panels ourselves. We don't take free review units for manufacturers because the second you do that, you can't say the stuff I'm about to say. If you want to support actual independent testing where we can tell you when a $3,000 TV is a waste of money, hit that subscribe button. It's the only way we keep doing this. All right, let's talk about the Sony tax versus reality. Let's be real for a second. The TV market it's a shouting match. It's loud, and the way you win a shouting match in a Best Buy or a Costco isn't by being accurate, it's by being bright. It's by screaming, "Look at me," with 2,000 nits of brightness that, let's be honest, you're never actually going to use unless you're trying to tan your face while watching the news. Here's the dirty little secret most manufacturers won't tell you. To get those crazy brightness numbers on the box, they cheat. They pump up the blue energy in the panel. Why blue? Because blue LED energy is cheap and efficient, but when you crank the blue, your whites aren't white anymore. They're cool, they're icy, so the skin tones look a little sickly, the clouds look like they're from a sci-fi movie, and everything just feels off. It feels digital. And that's fine if you're watching football in a sunroom with floor-to-ceiling windows at noon. Who cares about accuracy when you're fighting the sun? But if you're like me, if you're the kind of person who dims the lights, maybe puts up some blackout curtains and actually wants to see the movie, not the TV, but the movie, that blue boost is the enemy. Enter the Sony A95L. This thing, look, I have a love-hate relationship with Sony. I really do. Their menus are a maze, their remote controls feel like they're from 2005, and their pricing is borderline offensive. But then you turn this thing on and it's annoying. It's annoying how good it is. See, the A95L isn't trying to win the shouting match. It's trying to be a window. It uses a QD-OLED panel. Now, pause. If you don't know what that means, quantum dot OLED, it's basically the marriage of the two best TV technologies we have. You get the perfect blacks of OLED, where a pixel just turns off for black, and you get the pure, high-volume color of quantum dots. Standard OLEDs, the ones we've been buying for 10 years, they have a weakness. To get bright, they use a white subpixel. It's like adding water to paint. Yeah, you get more paint, but it's diluted. The color washes out. QD-OLED doesn't do that. It blasts pure color. But here's the kicker. Sony doesn't make the panel. Samsung Display makes the panel. So why am I talking about the Sony A95L and not the Samsung S90D? They're cousins, right? Same DNA? Because of this, or, well, the silicone inside the TV, the processor. This is where the Sony tax goes. It's the XR processor. And I know, processor sounds like marketing fluff, AI, cognitive intelligence, or whatever buzzword they're using this week. But in the lab, it's real.
When you feed a signal into a Samsung, it wants to make it pop. It wants to impress you. When you feed a signal into the Sony A95L, it asks a different question. It asks, what is this supposed to look like? We call it creator intent, and it sounds pretentious, right? Like something a film student would say wearing a beret, the creator's intent. But think about it. If a director graded a scene to look dark, gritty, and oppressive like the Batman, and your TV brightens the shadows to show you the details in the corner of the room, the TV just ruined the movie. It broke the immersion. It showed you the wires. The A95L is the only consumer TV on the market right now that, out of the box, in professional mode, tracks the EOTF curve, that's the map for how bright each specific part of the image should be, almost perfectly. It's scary accurate. I measured a delta E of 0.8 on this unit. For context, anything under 3.0 is considered good. Anything under 1.0 is indistinguishable from perfect to the human eye. This TV is doing that without me touching a single calibration setting. That's unheard of. Usually I have to spend 4 hours with a meter and software to get a TV to look this good. Sony just ships it like this. And it's not just the charts, it's the feel. There's a depth to the image on the A95L that other screens struggle to replicate. It's three-dimensional. That's the tone mapping. When the movie asks for a highlight that's brighter than the TV can physically do, say a 4,000 nit explosion, most TVs panic. They either clip the detail, turning the explosion into a white blob, or they dim the whole screen to compensate. Sony rolls it off. It gently compresses the highlight so you still see the orange and yellow in the fire, you still see the shrapnel, but it fits within the TV's capability. It's elegant, it's confident. But we have to talk about the stupid stuff, because for $3,400, there is some stupid stuff.
First off, HDMI ports. This is a flagship, top-of-the-line sell-your-kidney TV, and it only has 2 HDMI 2.1 ports, and one of them, it's the eARC port. So if you have a soundbar, you lose one. That leaves you with one high-speed port for your PS5, your Xbox, your PC. Choose your fighter because you can't have them all plugged in at once without a splitter. In 2026, that is inexcusable. LG gives you 4, Samsung gives you 4, Sony gives you 2 and a shrug. And the bugs. Look, I love the picture, but early on, this thing was a mess with Dolby Vision gaming. It's mostly fixed now with firmware updates, but it just goes to show, even when you pay the premium, you're still a beta tester sometimes. Also, let's talk about the stand. If you don't wall mount this, the feet sit at the absolute edge of the screen. You need a media console that is literally as wide as the TV. If your table is 2 inches too narrow, tough luck. You're buying a new table or a Visa stand. It's these little arrogance things from Sony that drive me crazy. Buy our TV, buy our furniture, buy our ecosystem. So here's the verdict on the King. If you are a purist, if you own 4K Blu-rays, if you care about grain structure in film, if you want to see exactly what the colorists saw on their $30,000 monitor in Hollywood, the Sony A95L is it. There is nothing better. It is the end of the road. You buy this, you stop looking at TV reviews for 5 years. You're done. But is it $1,200 better than the competition? That's the math that keeps me up at night, because we are deep, deep into the territory of diminishing returns here. We're chasing the last 2% of performance for 50% more money. And that brings me to a question for you guys, because I read the comments, I see the debates. Does that reference accuracy actually matter to you? Be honest, when you're watching Netflix on a Tuesday night, do you care if the red is delta E 0.8 accurate, or do you just want it to look punchy and fun? Let me know in the comments, team accuracy or team pop. I'm genuinely curious where the line is for you, because if you are team accuracy, but your bank account is looking at that $3,400 price tag and laughing at you, there is another way. There is a TV that uses the exact same processing philosophy, the same creator intent DNA, the same excellent motion handling that makes movies look like film and not a soap opera, but it ditches the fancy quantum dots. It uses a standard OLED panel. It's not as bright, it's not as colorful in the extreme highlights, but it's almost half the price. Let's talk about the Sony Bravia 8. This is the Robin to the A95L's Batman. It's the sidekick, but sometimes the sidekick is actually the one you want to hang out with because Batman is too intense and high maintenance. The Bravia 8 is a WOLED, white OLED. That's the older tech. It's what LG has been refining for a decade. It's reliable, it's proven, and because it's a Sony OLED, you still get that XR processor, you still get that incredible upscaling. See, this is what people forget. We obsess over 4K HDR specs, but 80% of what you watch, it's garbage. It's low bitrate YouTube, it's cable news, it's old sitcoms streamed at 1080p. The Sony tax pays for the chip that cleans that mess up, and the Bravia 8 has that chip. So you're sitting there watching The Office for the 50th time. Does it look better on the $3,400 A95L than on the $1,800 Bravia 8? Barely. In fact, I'd argue that for SDR content, standard dynamic range, which is still most of TV, the difference is negligible. You only really see the A95L pull away when you feed it high-octane 4000 nit HDR content. That's when the QD-OLED flexes. That's when the color volume kicks in. But if you're just watching The Bear on Hulu, the Bravia 8 is giving you 95% of the experience. The blacks are just as black, the motion is just as smooth, the colors are still incredibly accurate because Sony's factory calibration is just better than everyone else's. But it's not perfect. It's dimmer, significantly dimmer. If you put the Bravia 8 in a bright living room, it's going to struggle. It doesn't have the raw horsepower to punch through glare like the A95L or the mini LEDs do. It's a vampire TV. It wants the dark. And again, the ports. Still only 2 HDMI 2.1 ports. Sony, please, I'm begging you, stop doing this.
So here's the first checkpoint in our decision tree. If you have a dedicated theater room, blackout curtains, you want the best, you buy the A95L. You cry once when you pay the bill, and then you smile for 5 years. If you want that same accuracy, that same director's vision, but you're putting it in a normal bedroom or a den and you want to save $1,500 to buy, I don't know, a fantastic sound system, you buy the Bravia 8. But what if you don't care about the Sony look? What if you're a gamer? What if you want brightness that actually hurts your eyes? What if you want a TV that doesn't treat you like a film student, but treats you like a power user? And what if I told you there's a TV that is technically brighter than the A95L, has better gaming features, and costs less, but it has a fatal flaw that might make you return it on day one? We need to talk about matte screens, and we need to talk about Samsung, because on paper, the S95D destroys everything I just talked about. But in the real world, in your living room, it's complicated. It eats light. That's the only way to describe the Samsung S95D. This is the most controversial TV of the year, and honestly, it's the most frustrating one to review because it fixes one problem by creating another that might be worse. See, Samsung decided that reflections are the enemy, and they're right. If you have a window behind your couch, a blackout OLED turns into a mirror. You're not watching The Mandalorian, you're watching yourself eating chips on the couch while watching The Mandalorian. It breaks the immersion. So they put this glare-free matte coating on the S95D, and functionally, it works. It's like magic. You can have a sunbeam hitting this thing and you barely see it. But physics is cruel. You can't destroy light, you can only scatter it. So when that ambient light hits the matte finish, it scatters across the surface. And suddenly, those perfect inky OLED blacks, the whole reason you buy an OLED, they lift. In a bright room, the S95D doesn't look like an OLED. It looks like a really good LCD. The contrast drops, the pop fades.
And here's where the creator intent argument gets messy. If you're a purist, this matte screen is heresy. It alters the image texture. It adds a tiny bit of grain. It kills the sharpness just a hair. But if you're a normal person with a normal living room that has windows, it might actually be the only OLED you can use during the day. But then you turn it on, and you meet Tizen, Samsung's software. Look, I don't want to be mean, but it feels like it's fighting you. It's heavy, it's bloated, and the out-of-the-box settings, they are aggressive. Remember that shouting match I talked about? Samsung is the loudest guy in the room.
To get the S95D to look accurate, to get it to respect the director's vision, you have to fight it. You have to turn off intelligent mode. You have to dial back the color booster. You have to fix the gamma. You can get it there. The panel is capable of incredible accuracy. It covers like 99.8% of the color space. Technically, it's a Ferrari, but they sell it to you with the parking brake on and the radio blasting at max volume. However, if you are a gamer, if you have a PS5, an Xbox Series X, and a high-end PC, the Samsung S95D starts to look like the winner. Why? Remember how I roasted Sony for having only 2 HDMI 2.1 ports? Samsung gives you 4. All 4 ports do 4K, 144 Hz. You can plug everything in, no switchers, no swapping cables. And the input lag? It's non-existent. It feels instantaneous. The game bar menu actually lets you tweak things that matter, like shadow detail in FPS games so you can see campers in the dark corners. So we have this weird split. The Sony A95L is for the film lover who tolerates gaming. The Samsung S95D is for the gamer who tolerates film and hates reflections. But there is a third option. What if I told you there's a company that looked at the OLED burn-in problem, the fear that static logos like CNN or ESPN will permanently etch themselves into your $3,000 screen, and they solved it with brute force? Let's talk about the LG G4.
LG is the sleeping giant here. They make the panels for everyone else, except the QD-OLEDs, so they know the tech better than anyone. And for the G4, they use something called MLA, Micro Lens Array. Billions, literal billions of microscopic lenses layered over the pixels to focus the light. Why does that matter? Because usually to get an OLED bright, you have to pump more voltage through it. More voltage equals more heat equals burn-in. It's a ticking clock. MLA lets LG get brighter without pumping up the voltage. It's efficiency, not brute force. And because they are so confident in this tech, LG offers a 5-year panel warranty on the G series. Let that sink in. 5 years. If you're the type of person who gets anxiety leaving the TV on a pause screen, if you worry about your kids leaving YouTube on all day, that warranty is worth its weight in gold. Sony doesn't give you that. Samsung doesn't give you that. And the picture? The G4 is violent. It is incredibly bright. In some scenes, it actually punches harder than the Sony. The highlights are razor sharp. But it's a OLED. Remember the WITS subpixel dilution I mentioned? In the super bright colors, like a neon lightsaber or a laser blast, the G4 loses a tiny bit of saturation compared to the Sony or Samsung QD-OLEDs. The color volume isn't quite as high. Does it matter? To a colorist, yes. To you, probably not. What does matter is that LG's processing has finally caught up. For years, Sony was the king of upscaling and motion. LG has closed that gap. The new Alpha 11 processor in the G4 is a beast. It cleans up noise, it handles motion without that soap opera glaze. It's 98% of the way to Sony. So now the math gets really hard. You have the Sony A95L, the perfect, accurate, expensive cinema master. You have the Samsung S95D, the bright, matte gaming powerhouse that fights reflections but fights you on settings. And you have the LG G4, the reliable, warranty-backed, super bright all-rounder that fits flush on your wall. And then there's the unicorn. I have to mention it or the comment section will eat me alive. The Panasonic Z95A. If you live in Europe, you guys know Panasonic is the cult classic. It's the TV Hollywood colorists actually use at home. It has a massive heatsink, it runs cool, it lasts forever. It supports every HDR format, Dolby Vision, HDR10+, all of it. But in the US, it's a ghost. You can barely find it. It's expensive, and it runs on Fire TV OS now, which, look, it's fine, but do you really want the Amazon interface on your $3,000 flagship TV? It's the hipster choice. It's incredible. It's accurate.
but unless you have a specific reason to hunt it down, the support network and availability just aren't there like they are for LG or Sony. We're at a point where bad TVs in this price range don't really exist. We're splitting hairs, but those hairs cost you $1,000. The biggest lie in the industry right now is that you need the newest model, because here's the secret regarding longevity. These panels, they degrade. All OLEDs do. The blue organic material wears out faster than the red and green. That's just chemistry. If you buy the Sony A95L, you're banking on that heatsink and Sony's thermal management to keep it alive. If you buy the Samsung, you're trusting their aggressive brightness algorithms won't cook the panel. If you buy the LG G4, you have a piece of paper that says we'll fix it if it breaks. That piece of paper changes the value proposition completely. If I'm spending $3,000, I want to know I'm not buying a disposable product. I want to know it's going to be in my living room in 2030. And that brings me to the sound. Sony does this magic trick called acoustic surface audio. The screen is the speaker. It vibrates. Sound comes directly from the actor's mouth. It is hands down the best built-in sound on the market. You could almost get away without a soundbar. The LG G4, it's thin. Physics again. Thin TVs sound thin. You need a soundbar. The Samsung S95D, it's okay. It has object tracking, but it's tinny compared to the Sony. So if you're trying to keep your setup clean, no bars, no subwoofers, Sony wins again, but at a premium. Okay, we've looked at the specs, we've looked at the screens, we've looked at the flaws.
Now I'm going to tell you what I would actually buy, not as a reviewer with a budget, but as a guy who hates wasting money. And the answer, it might annoy you because it depends on when you are watching. The reason this decision is so hard isn't because the TVs are bad. It's because they're specialized. We used to just buy the best TV. Now you have to buy the TV that matches your neuroses. If you are obsessive about burn-in, if you check the total power on hours in the service menu every month, you can't buy the A95L. You just can't. You'll be too stressed. You need the LG G4. You need that 5-year panel warranty. It's the only way you'll sleep at night. The peace of mind is worth more than the slight difference in red saturation. If you are a daytime warrior, if you watch football on Sundays with the blinds open, you can't buy the Bravia 8. It'll look dim, it'll look sad. You need the Samsung S95D. You need that matte coating to eat the reflections, or the LG G4 to power through them with raw brightness. You want the Sony look without the Sony tax. Buy the Bravia 8. Here's why. The magic of the A95L isn't just the panel, it's the XR processor, it's the brain. The Bravia 8 has the exact same brain. It has the same motion handling, it has the same upscaling, it has the same natural skin tones, it has the same creator intent philosophy. What do you lose? You lose the quantum dot color volume in the top 5% of brightness. You lose the blinding highlights. But let me ask you, how often are you watching content that actually has those highlights? If you're watching Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, or cable, that content is compressed. It doesn't have the data to push the A95L to its limit anyway. For 90% of the content you actually watch, the Bravia 8 looks 98% identical to the A95L, and it costs $1,500 less. That is the smart money. That is the technician's choice. But a massive warning, do not step down to the Bravia 7 or the Bravia 3 thinking it's the same. It's not. The Bravia 7 is mini LED. It blooms. The blooming kills the accuracy. The Bravia 3 is just don't. It's a budget TV with a Sony sticker. The sweet spot is the OLED, the Bravia 8. So, the final verdict, best overall, the money is fake option, Sony A95L. It is the reference. It is the king. If you can afford it, buy it and never look back. Best for anxiety and bright rooms? LG G4. The warranty is unbeatable. The brightness is violent. It's the tank. The smart buy, the winner, Bravia 8. It gives you the accuracy, the processing, and the Sony look for a price that actually makes sense.
Look, at the end of the day, your room matters more than the TV. If you put an A95L in a room with white walls and no curtains, you just wasted your money. The light bouncing off your walls will wash out the screen more than any panel defect ever could. Fix your room first, then buy the TV. I've put links to the exact model numbers I tested below. Be careful with Amazon. Sometimes they list the older K or L series mixed in with the new ones. The links below are the specific panels I verified. If this saved you from buying a hypebeast TV you didn't need, hit subscribe. We're going to do soundbars next, and man, is that industry full of snakes. I'm Chris Walker. I'll see you in the next one.